What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Dynasty. Today, you guys are getting a bonus episode of the Dynasty Trade Show. It's easy to record these Dynasty Trade Shows, so I figured why not give it to you guys while I'm on vacation. So if you guys are seeing me on the screen today, I am not physically in this seat, so I am somewhere else across the country, but you guys still are getting a Dynasty Trade Show nonetheless. And as you guys know, Let's Talk Dynasty would not be Let's Talk Dynasty. Reviewing trades would not be the same unless I had my co-host here in the pilot seat with me. So let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's get my guy MFGDs in the building and let's start talking some dynasty trades. What? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Pretty good, man. I'm ready to get this Dynasty Trade Show going. Let's do it.
Let's go, man. And it's a little bit of a shorter episode today. Not as long as we usually go. We usually go about an hour. We talk 10-ish trades usually. We're going about 7 today. So not as many trades in the Discord. It's only been a week since our last trade show at the time of this recording. So I found 7 that were interesting enough that we'll talk about them today. But let's throw these on the screen. And we'll start with the trade that is on the thumbnail right now. And this is a trade submitted by Gerard Mayo. It is a 12-team Superflex PPR, an extra full point for the tight end premium, 6-point passing touchdown, and start 12. And Gerard Mayo says he is a contending roster or trying to contend. So because of that, he traded away Odunze, and he got Cooper Kupp and a 2025 second. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this deal because I definitely feel some type of way about this one.
Oh yeah, I know you do because I know your valuation of Odunze. I think in the context of him being a contender, if you want to look at it through the scope of like Rome's not going to be able to put up the numbers that are going to benefit your team winning the championship this season, you're going with Cooper Kupp in the second, but I don't know. I just have a gut feeling like that Cooper Kupp is probably not going to be enough of the boost you need to like put you over the top for a prospect as good as Odunze. So I mean, I definitely want to lean the inked up bomb side, but yeah, man, that's kind of where I'm going with it, man. I understand he's a contender, but sometimes you gotta just not make the move whether you're contending or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, Inked Up got a discount on an elite young asset. I don't know the order of which they're coming out, but while I am out of town, I am pre-recording a bunch of my Dynasty cornerstone pieces. And for people who don't know, a cornerstone piece is usually a young asset. There's only like 12 to 15 of them. I think I kept my list like very short, like 12 to 15 players. And these are assets that can be added to a rebuilding team and or a contending roster, and they're assets that you just want a diamond hand. Like these are the best assets to build dynasty rosters around, and Odunze makes that list for me. Odunze is one of those players that no matter if I'm contending or rebuilding, I want him on my roster, and I understand that there are concerns about Odunze possibly not being super being a super contributor for your dynasty teams this year because you have Keenan Allen, whose 1-year contract is still going to be there in Chicago. You have DJ Moore, and we have the Shane Waldron fear where we saw what happened with JSN last year, and people are worried about that. But I do want to kind of point out the differences of what that JSN role is and what a Odunze role is because they are different players. Now, when you look at the Bears offense, and you tell me if I'm wrong, War, but it seems like DJ Moore will play outside, Rome will play outside, and Keenan will play in the slot.
That is my exact thoughts on how it will be set up.
So if that is the way that it goes, in those 2 wide receiver sets, we expect Rome and DJ Moore out there, right?
Yes.
Whereas in Seattle, it was DK outside, Lockett outside, JSN in the slot. So on two wide receiver sets, JSN, he was off the field. So I think there's a difference in what Rome Odunze and JSN were going to be. Also, let's be honest, Rome Odunze is a better prospect than what JSN is, even though I like
Yeah.
JSN. So I think you get out of this deal a little bit light. I think we can't necessarily view them as the same. I don't mind you wanting to push the chips in, go get a championship. Although June 8th, which is the time of this recording right now, June 8th, I don't know if you're pushing your chips in now. I mean, we don't even play games for 2 more months, 3 more months. Like we don't even know. And so I would have liked. I'd feel a lot better about this deal. I think I still prefer the Romo Dunze side, but I feel a lot better if you get a first instead of a second. But because you're getting Kupp and a second, it just doesn't feel like enough. And I think Kupp's a good bounce back candidate. Like I think he can
Yeah.
have another good year. I think he's a good contending piece. But last year, 13.7 fantasy points per game. I know he was banged up. He was the 23rd overall wide receiver in points per game. Like it just doesn't feel like enough. And I'll ask you this, War, because if the second is all you could get back, how far down do you have to go? Like, does this change your mind if it's Nico in a second for Rome Odunze, like Nico Collins, or do you still prefer Rome?
I still prefer Rome.
I do too. That's the issue. And then it's like, do you get to the Chris Olave side? If it's Olave in a second, do you prefer Olave or Rome?
It's definitely around that Olave, Devonta Smith like
That's where it has to
area.
be.
Yeah.
And Cooper Kupp is not one of those pieces. So,
We're talking about at Rome, we're talking about a guy that had Marvin Harrison not been in the draft, Rome could have been the first receiver. And I understand Nabers was taken before him, but since the draft, I've heard a lot of experts say that they would prefer Rome over Nabers. So
well,
I mean,
it was rumored that if Marvin Harrison went off the board uh, at 3 to the New England Patriots, that the Cardinals would have taken Rome at 4.
yeah, yeah. So I think you're looking at a really elite prospect, and I think a lot of people are just looking at the wide receiver room, the fact that he was the third wide receiver taken, and maybe they're like taking him a little bit light, but they definitely should not be doing that.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I think if you want to push the chips in, y- I wouldn't have been Cup in a second just wouldn't have been enough for me. Maybe if it's Tyreek Hill in a second or Tyreek Hill in a first, like then I'm like, all right, that's how good I am with Rome. But I value Rome very highly. I just think he is a very good prospect. I think the ceiling is very high, and maybe that's hope for somebody who's just like hoping that the rookie develops into something. But rookies, young talent, it is the lifeblood of dynasty fantasy football rosters. I mean, like I said, those cornerstone pieces are what make you a dynasty. And the days of Cooper Kupp being elite are probably not over, but they're very short. There's a very short window here.
Yeah, and just to peel back the curtain a little bit, me and you even had some brief negotiations about Rome, and
Mhm.
you're like, "Look, man, I'm looking for a Drake London and a piece." So I mean, that's like the price that Rome should probably be going for right about now. So
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I think for what it's worth, like that's where the conversation started. And knowing where your roster is at, like you were throwing around names like Zay Flowers and things like that. And it's like for me, the only name on the roster that even gets me interested in talking is Drake London. So it's like that's how highly I view him. And Drake London right now, he's like the wide receiver 11 on KTC. Rome, the wide receiver 15. They're pretty close in value. So it's like I need to be in that tier of player to get off of my Romo Dunze. And I probably was giving you a little bit of a Bears tax saying like, you got to pay me a little bit more just to come get your guy. But, know your league mates. But that is where the conversation starts. And again, just to summarize this one, um, 2 points is I just don't understand, feeling the need to really push in those chips in June. And I also don't necessarily love the compensation coming back enough to get off of an elite cornerstone asset.
I 100% agree. You got to see training camp, man. You never know who could be on your roster that flashes in training camp that might make you say, hold up, I don't have to make this deal because I'm going to see what he can do. Maybe he could get an opportunity. So you never know. That's why these trades this early in the offseason are a little bit risky every time.
What if Keenan Allen gets hurt before the season starts? Now all of a sudden we're talking about Odunze is playing a full-time role. Like there's a lot that could happen, man. So
what if
let's move
Cooper
on to
Kupp gets hurt? And I mean, he's been
was hurt
hurt.
last
So
year.
I mean, yeah. So
Exactly. That I totally agree. Let's go on to the next one though. We have this second trade, and it wouldn't be a dynasty trade show without Chris Olave being in the trade show, because every damn trade show, somebody in our Discord wants to trade away or trade for Chris Olave. At least this time, Jayden, the guy who submitted this one, is trading for Chris Olave, and he gives up T. Higgins and Kendre Miller. This is a 12-team super flex, full PPR, and a start 10. So how are we feeling about this deal? I feel like Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Kendre Miller, we got some interesting pieces in this deal, but is that enough for Olave?
I mean, it's kind of difficult for me because Olave and Higgins are both like my guys. So I mean, on the surface, this trade looks fair to me. You're getting for Olave, you're getting back T. Higgins, who very well could get moved to a team where he is of higher priority, because I mean, you don't have too many Jamar Chases going around. And you're getting who's probably the heir apparent to Alvin Kamara. So I mean, on the surface, this trade looks fair to me, man.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think if I were to tell you the side I prefer the Chris Olave side. And this isn't because I dislike T. Higgins or Kendre Miller. I've actually, this offseason, I've had Kendre Miller in videos where I talked about him being a piece that you should be throwing on your rosters just in case, the Saints ended up moving on from Alvin Kamara in the offseason, or we just know how inefficient Kamara has been on the ground. These things are reasons why Kendre Miller could have some value. T. Higgins, agree with you where it looks like he's probably going to play in Cincy this year. Moving forward, who knows what happens, but there's one player in the deal where they have the ability to step into a top 12 wide receiver type of range in 2024, and that's Chris Olave. We know that the opportunity that he has there in New Orleans, there's really no competition. Like Rashid Shaheed, very solid player, but he's not really any major competition for what Chris Olave is. Juwan Johnson, not major competition. A.T. Perry, no way. Like there's
don't be
just
hating
no.
on A.T.
I like A.T. I got A.T. on a lot of rosters, but taking away Olave's target share is just not what he's going to do.
No.
And I think it's a good buy on Olave here. You gave up some pieces that seem interesting enough on paper, and overall, I think it's a good buy on Olave. Like I said, I don't hate anybody in the deal. I just don't see the ceiling as much for the other two guys. Now, if Alvin Kamara gets hurt, Kendre Miller's, all of a sudden in the Kamara role, and we're seeing all those receptions and rushing the football and things like that, it could flip the other way. But today, I like the Olave side.
I mean, this trade, yeah, Olave does have the highest ceiling out of everybody in this deal. I do think a lot of people are sleeping on Olave. I've always just been a big T. Higgins guy. I think they could put up comparable numbers, and it's kind of just like you get Kendre Miller in there too, and you have opportunity if Kendre pops, then you actually could come out with like a running back one out of this. So I mean, that's the way I was viewing the trade.
Fair enough. I mean, I just want to pull up their numbers. I mean, last year, actually, let's go the last 2 seasons for Chris Olave. He has been wide receiver 25 on a points per game basis and wide receiver 19. So he's been floating in that wide receiver 2 range. And I think where he's being valued on KTC right now is wide receiver 13. So we're viewing him almost as like a high-end wide receiver 2, but he's been giving us low-end wide receiver 2 numbers. So we want to see him take that step forward. Now, T. Higgins on the other side, this is a guy who I think for a lot of the time we've been a little bit lower on because of him being shadowed or in the shadow of Jamar Chase. But the production hasn't been as great for him either. You have the last 2 seasons, 26th overall, so outside of the top 25, and then last year, 40th overall. Now, it's probably not fair to pull those numbers because he was banged up for a majority of the year. Joe Burrow wasn't on the field for a majority of the year, but he is currently being valued as wide receiver 23 on Keep Trade Cut. It just feels like the ceiling, the guy you want to bet on is Chris Olave, and if all it costs me is a lotto ticket in Kendre Miller, I'm willing to give up my lotto ticket to go get that sure thing.
I can't argue with that.
So, all right, let's go on to trade number 3. Trade 3 here, submitted by 2 of our guys here, Rookie in the Vet and Sugar. They made a trade. This one was submitted by Rookie in the Vet. He says 12-team super flex PPR. It's a half-point tight end premium, a 6-point passing touchdown, and start 10. He is a contending roster. Sugar is a rebuilding roster. It is Garrett Wilson for a 25 first, which is Sugar's. It's his own first. So now he controls his destiny. If he wants to tank, he can tank. He can go and chase that number 1 pick. And he gets a 26 first thrown in there as well. How do you feel about 2 firsts with the possibility of that 25 being early for a Garrett Wilson?
Oh, man. Shoot, man. You might call me crazy, man, but I like the idea of getting the 2 first. I just like the idea, man. I really like Garrett Wilson, man. It's just that where are we ranking Garrett Wilson these days? Because just like
He's
Olave,
wide receiver 7. He's wide receiver 7 on Keep Trade Cut.
Do you feel like that's overvalued? Do you think that's properly valued?
I think it's properly valued. Well, yeah, I think it's properly valued. I think he's in that tier. We talk about the tier on the last episode, which again, I feel like anytime we talk about this tier of wide receivers specifically, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, it just stirs up controversy in the comments. Like everybody in the comment section just hates what we say about this tier of players. But I mean, last week they were going in all week long about, you made the comments of Kyler Murray is better quarterback than Matthew Stafford.
He is.
And people lost their minds.
In fantasy football, he is.
I think that's part of the issue is what people were going to, like, real life NFL quarterback, but it's like we're talking about dynasty fantasy football here.
Yeah, that's what the channel's about.
Yeah, we're talking about fantasy football here, boys. So let's keep that in mind. But let's not bring that back up. We don't need that in the comment section again all week. With that being said, that tier is Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and AJ Brown. I think that's like the top 6 to 8. However you want to put it, you can put it. I have AJ Brown at the top of the tier. Most people have him at the bottom of the tier, but I think that is where he probably belongs. So if you want to have Wilson at 6, I don't blame you. If you want to have him at 8, I don't blame you. But I don't think we can put him lower than 8 right now, because if you throw him down there, you're talking about him or Jalen Waddle, him or Malik Nabers. And I think we prefer Garrett Wilson over those guys.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like, I think Garrett Wilson is awesome. Any reservations I have about Garrett Wilson has more to do with the bustability of Aaron Rodgers. Because a lot of people with a straight face can't sit here today and say, I believe Aaron Rodgers is going to be an elite quarterback next season. And we've seen what Garrett Wilson kind of does. He's not who he could really be without that quarterback. You know what I mean? And I bake that into it. So when I just bake into that, I don't think, okay, let me shoot straight. When I bake into the fact that I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be good this season. Sorry, Brett. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be good this season. I automatically factor that into how I value Garrett Wilson, and those 2 first look good when I think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing here is the fact that Shane is recouping his own 25 first, which does allow him to control his destiny. I think that has a lot of value in itself, because if you do want to throw the season, you do want to take a shot at being number 1, finding yourself a guy like Shadur Sanders. Maybe Shadur ends up being QB1 in the class, and you want that type of asset on your roster. Maybe you want a guy like Territorial McMillan. Like, maybe you want a guy like Luther Burden. I understand you wanting to take that shot. And then you get a 26 first as well. So for the next 2 years, you get to add some elite young assets. It's costing you an elite young asset, but I don't mind diversifying, getting liquid in a rebuild. But on the opposite side of the coin, like this is a pretty fair price, I think, for Rookie and the Vet to pay to go get a young elite wide receiver prospect.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, man. Like when it comes to Aaron Rodgers this season, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with getting behind it. And I say that mainly because like I keep doing these underdog drafts and it's 2024 best ball. So like we're only focused on this year. But every single time I get to the tier of quarterback that Aaron Rodgers is sitting in, I can never press draft. I never can do it. And in that tier of his right now, it's like Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield.
And I trust all those guys more than Aaron Rodgers.
All of them. All of them. And it's just like I can't. If Kirk or Stafford are there, I'm clicking them every time. If Rodgers, if it's between like Rodgers and Watson, I think I'm just going to shoot the upside on Deshaun Watson. If it's Rodgers and Baker, maybe a little bit closer of an argument, but I think I still lean Baker Mayfield just because he's lower in ADP. So it's like I'm having a hard time trusting Aaron Rodgers this year. I'm having a hard time trusting what this Jets offense is going to look like. I know there is no way to debate it. Injured, busted, old Aaron Rodgers, if that is what we get, is an upgrade from Zach Wilson.
Yes.
Point blank, period. It's just the way it's going to be. So Garrett Wilson will be fine, but the Jets as a whole, I'm worried, man. Mike Williams doesn't even have a timeline for when he's going to be back. Malachi Corley is a very unique prospect. I like him as a prospect, but he is going to have to be schemed almost the way that Deebo Samuel was schemed in San Francisco, and that's fine because LaFleur is it's LaFleur. No, it's not LaFleur. It's the other Shanahan, right? The other Shanahan is the OC there. Am I tripping?
You might be tripping. I'm not sure though.
Jets.
So let's just roll with it.
Wait. It was one of the was one of those guys, but now it's Nathaniel Hackett. So
oh yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, it's Nathaniel Hackett. So like do we trust them to scheme a guy like Malachi? Do we trust them to scheme? I don't know, man. It's tough. It seems to me it's going to be the Breece Hall show and the Garrett Wilson show again. They're just going to force feed these guys. And I think ultimately in context of this trade, I think both sides win. This is one of those trades where it's like it makes sense for both parties. And I think there's just a little bit more question marks, I think, about Garrett Wilson than I want, especially at the cost that we pay. But I can't lower him anymore. Like, I guess let me ask you in that tier, and we are going to enter this territory again.
Oh God.
AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson. Rank those three for me.
Why are you doing this to me?
Well, I'll rank them. I'll rank them. For me, it's AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson.
I got Puka, Garrett Wilson like reversed.
So you go AJ, Garrett, Puka.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I think a lot of people are going to be upset that we have AJ high.
I mean, we know it's fine.
Fuck them. Like if people want to be upset about it, that's what tiers are for, bro. Like you're supposed to, you can go either way. Like both of these make sense for different reasons, but I just think for me, Garrett Wilson, there's more question marks than there are. And I love Garrett Wilson. Keep in mind, I've been one of the biggest like Garrett Wilson truthers for the last couple of years. But anyways, I just think that's where I lean with this one, but it's a good trade for both parties.
Yeah, I agree.
Our friends at Underdog Fantasy are the #1 place for daily fantasy sports. You can now play their Fantasy Pick'em game, which lets you pick higher or lower on your favorite players from any sport. All you have to do is make your picks and watch the money multiplier increase for maximum winnings. The app is super user-friendly, making it very easy to use, and when you sign up using code League FFB, you will be directly supporting our show. Not only that, but Underdog will give you a new customer special, which is a free square for your first Pick'em entry, and they will match your first deposit up to $100, giving you double the cash to play with. So if you want to support our show and get in on some daily fantasy sports action, click the link in our description and sign up for Underdog Fantasy using code LEAGUEFFB. So thank you again for our sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. And with that out of the way, let's get back into the action. All right, let's go to trade number 4. We have this trade submitted by Anon. It's an interesting one here. He is going to get Saquon Barkley. He gives up Kenneth Walker, a 26 first-round pick, and a 25 third. It is a 10-team super flex PPR half-point tight end premium and start 9. He says he is a contending roster. So, War, you're giving up Kenneth Walker, the younger running back asset, and a 26 first for an upgrade in points per game, most likely, to an older running back. How do we feel about this?
I mean, even the way you broke down, we should know how I'm feeling about it. I'm definitely leading the Kenneth Walker side. That first is absolutely like the be-all, end-all deal breaker in this thing. And it's not that I don't believe in Saquon Barkley. It's just that younger running back asset, age when it comes to running back is like key. It's like key, even though we know that Kenneth Walker has had some injuries here. But I mean, Saquon's not necessarily injury-free over the course of his career either. And then he's going to an Eagles offense where, quite frankly, there's more opportunities for other people to cut into his workload. It's not like the Giants where he was like the key focal point of the offense. Now we're talking about Jalen Hurts vulturing touchdowns at the goal line. We're talking about, the Eagles always have been a team that like to use multiple running backs. And you're acquiring him, but you're giving up the younger running back asset and the first. I don't care about the third. So yeah, I'm leaning the Kenneth Walker side for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and I'm gonna try and make a case for the other side of this argument here, because you look at the league settings. A 10-team league, start 9. It's not your full 12-team league. It's also not a full, start 10 is pretty standard. So start 9 is a little bit shallower, which does mean that having that hammer or that higher producing asset is more valuable. The depth isn't as important. So maybe that's partially an argument. Now, with that being said, I do agree with you in the process of trading the younger running back asset plus my future first for older running back asset is not good process. I don't like that. And you go and you look at the fantasy points per game. Let's just ask the question here. Is Philadelphia in 2024 an upgrade or a downgrade for Saquon Barkley's fantasy football value?
I want you to repeat those last 3 words you just said.
Is Philadelphia an upgrade or a downgrade for Saquon Barkley's fantasy football
value? Those are the key words. People often confuse real life football with fantasy football. In real life, yes, Saquon going to the Eagles is a big boost for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a big boost. Realistically, it's a downgrade. You have a team that, and I understand that they're like, oh yeah, we got a workhorse back now. Philadelphia, in their known recent history, have always used more than one running back because they're thinking about winning a championship. They're not thinking about fantasy football. So the idea that they're going to have Saquon getting all these carries and not trying to preserve him so he's 100% towards the end of the season, and you factor in also Jalen Hurts getting in on the rushing, it's a downgrade. It's a 100% downgrade.
Yeah, I think for me, you look at that Philly line, that offensive line is better than any line that he's probably played behind in New York. But you're right. Like, there are going to be some question marks that need to be answered. Now, Saquon, he's Saquon freaking Barkley. Like, he's still going to be efficient. He's still going to be good. But Jalen Hurts doesn't typically check the football down. So the reception numbers, which Saquon Barkley has been pretty solid with, maybe there's a question mark there. I'm not going to say that they're going to go away. I mean, he saw 41 receptions last year, 57 the year before. That's not like, I don't know, man. And then he saw double-digit touchdowns. Could he see it in Philadelphia? Absolutely. But could Hurts be used on the goal line? For sure. So I think that there's a couple question marks. And the reason why I say that is not to argue the fact that Saquon Barkley is not an upgrade to Kenneth Walker. He's an upgrade to Kenneth Walker. And what I was getting at was, you look at the fantasy points per game between the two. Last year in New York, Saquon, 15.9 fantasy points per game. Kenneth Walker, 13.3. So it's about a 2.5 point difference there. But is that 2.5 point difference worth a first round pick? Probably not. Probably not. I think if I was looking, and this is probably just the way that I would go about it, I would have liked to, if you need the running back upgrade, which is what he said, he needed a running back upgrade, or he needed to get another running back to help him contend. Could you not throw the Derrick Henry manager that 26 first round pick and just get Derrick Henry added to the roster?
You know, as a Derrick Henry owner, I was thinking that exact thing the entire time.
And then you get to keep Walker, you keep the third, and you just give up the 1 first and you get Derrick Henry. And there's a chance, I'm not saying that it's guaranteed, but there's a chance that Derrick Henry scores the same amount of points as Saquon does this year.
Yep. A very good chance.
So I think that's something that I would look at. I would have looked at if I needed the upgrade. And this gets back into the point where it seems like the mindset for dynasty managers right now, which is fine, that's fine, is people are starting to shift back into that, like, okay, how are these guys going to produce for me this year? Because it seems like we go through this flow, right, in dynasty, where in the offseason we think about long-term value, youth movement, we care about youth, we care about picks, we care about blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Then it's like July, June, August. Now it's like we're getting close to football season, and then everyone's like, okay, well, how is my team going to perform now? Now we care about the older assets, the win now guys. That's when Derrick Henry gets some more value. That's when Nick Chubb gets more value every year. Mike Evans gets more value. Like, now we start looking at those vets, pushing the chips in, making these moves to upgrade into a contender or upgrade your contender in June. Kind of silly. It just feels silly because there's too much time, especially at the running back position. There's too much time for shit to go haywire and somebody to get hurt, or somebody in training camp to look good, or somebody blah, 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 blah. There's too much. And so you push these chips in. If you're a contender, you're looking for that running back upgrade, you push that in week 5, week 6, week 7. Like, as teams in your league are starting to lose games and think about, okay, well, let's start thinking about 2025. Let's start thinking about 2026. Like, that's when you go over to their teams and you start poaching those older assets off their rosters, and you start getting the Derrick Henrys, the James Connors, the I don't know, those older running backs, and you just put them on your roster at a cheaper price because those guys want draft capital, future draft capital. Yeah. And you can get it at a discount. That's when you push the chips in. You don't push the chips in June. And I think that's the theme of today's trade show, because we have a lot of guys that are saying, I'm a contending roster and I'm trying to make this upgrade. We don't got to set lineups today. We don't got to push chips in today. Let's breathe. Let's breathe for a minute.
I think a lot of people lose sight of that, man. I think a lot of people feel like these things have to be done now. They don't. You can wait, let it play out, see how things progress, and then act on it.
And then I've heard the argument too. It's actually somebody in our league before I was talking with him, and he said, well, what happens when, you wait and that deal's no longer available down the road?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's the
Yeah.
risk of this, right? Like, so you can't get Saquon for this deal in September. Oh, well, now you go reach out to the Derrick Henry manager. Now you go reach out to, let's just look at a couple of these older assets. The Josh Jacobs manager, the Isaiah Pacheco manager. Like, Isaiah's not even old, but like, you go and ask him. You go to the Joe Mixon manager. Like, you can just get a couple more options. It doesn't have to be Saquon. Saquon's the most intriguing or the most attractive option because he's Saquon Barkley. But from a
You
points per
can
game,
freaking go grab the guy that Saquon replaced. You can go get Swift for like, I don't know, pennies on the dollar, but get him for a way more reasonable price.
Yeah, and then if you're looking to just add a back, then you add a back. If you're wanting an upgrade, you go get an upgrade. But I feel like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, and I want the comments to tell me if I'm wrong too. So, if you are giving Kenneth Walker and a first and a third, I feel like the upgrade I should be looking at is like a ETN Devon Achane type of asset.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's fair?
A running back asset that can both produce and be
Younger, and they have a high ceiling. Like,
yeah,
that's what's going to have to make. I think that's the issue. I think with the deal for me is you give up the future first, and I know it's 26, so a lot of people are like, it's 2 years from now. I have time to go get that back. That's true, but you give up the future first and a younger running back asset. I mean, Kenneth Walker, he's 23. He's 23, bro. Like, when there's rookie running backs in this year's class that are older than Kenneth Walker.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing that, giving up the youth and the pick, I need to have. I can't have worries that the running back I'm trading for could potentially hit the running back age cliff in 2024.
Yeah.
Which is a reality for Saquon. I'm not saying it'll happen, but that running back age cliff, it usually happens 27, 28 years old. Saquon's 27.
Yeah, he's right there. He's knocking on the door.
He turns 28 in season. I don't know, man. And we've already seen the wear and tear. So are we both agreeing although Saquon is an upgrade, from a value standpoint, you take the Walker in the first side?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go. We got a couple more. Trade number 5, Aaron Roblyer. He's the one who submitted this trade. It is a 12-team league, super flex league, and it's tiered PPR. So tiered PPR, if you're not familiar with that, half point per reception for the running backs, full point for the wide receivers, and 1.5 for the tight ends. So that's the way that goes. He says the third pick, that 103, turned into Malik Nabers. The 6th pick turned into Odunze. And that 201, the 13th overall pick, turned into Jonathon Brooks. So we are looking at Malik Nabers and Jonathon Brooks for Michael Pittman Jr. and Odunze. How are we feeling about this deal?
Well, when you put it like that, I'm leaning the Pittman and Odunze side.
How come?
Because we already spoke about it earlier. My personal opinion, I have Odunze over Nabers, and you're getting Pittman, who I would definitely have over any running back that came out in this year's draft. That means Jonathon Brooks. Yeah, this is pretty simple to me, man. I'm leaning the Pittman and Odunze side for sure.
Okay. And you say you have Odunze over Nabers. I think for the most part, that is probably against the consensus because I have Nabers over Odunze. Why do you have Odunze over Nabers? I'm just curious.
I didn't feel like that. Now it's gonna sound like I'm being a homer. I didn't feel like that prior to the draft. Like, I wanted Malik Nabers. I like Malik Nabers more. But the more I looked into it, just like what Odunze brings to the table, I feel like he has more tools in his skill set that he could take advantage of in the NFL. And I just feel like he's a better or more well-rounded receiver than Malik Nabers. And I mean, that's what it pretty much came down to. That, and I think he has a future great quarterback thrown to him. So, like, those are the factors that I look at. In the meanwhile, we're looking at Nabers with Daniel Jones, and then them hopefully attempting to get another quarterback in a draft where the quarterbacks aren't going to be that good. So, I mean, I looked at all those things.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's the big knock, at least in regards to Nabers right now, is that the quarterback play could be pretty bad for the next year or two. And even if Daniel Jones takes a step forward, what does he turn into? I don't know. Like, it'll be interesting to watch. I still have Nabers over Odunze, just because I think that the opportunity that Nabers is going to have, I keep comparing it to the situation that Drake London and Garrett Wilson were in when they were drafted into the NFL. Elite wide receiver prospects that went into situations where Desmond Ridder and Zach Wilson were throwing them footballs. And we still, to this day, had viewed London and Wilson as elite players, and eventually they got quarterback upgrades, and now we are very high on those two guys. So I think the same thing can happen for Nabers. But when you look at the trade and what this trade consists of, to me, the difference is what you said, Jonathan Brooks and Michael Pittman Jr. Because I think Malik Nabers and Rome Odunze, while I prefer Nabers, they're close enough that if you're getting a piece like Pittman compared to Jonathan Brooks, where, like you said, the running back and the wide receiver, also Michael Pittman, we saw him give us, we saw the numbers that he put together last year. Just looking back at 2023, you see that he was averaging, what was it? 15.6 fantasy points per game. That was 14th in the NFL. Dude was giving us high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 numbers on a week-to-week basis. And that was with Gardner Minshew. If you think that Anthony Richardson is an upgrade at quarterback, which the Colts seem to think it, and most, I think, fantasy gamers seem to think it, then Michael Pittman Jr.'s ceiling is still going to be just as high. He's a very, very good dynasty asset. And even though most people kind of disregard him because it's not like the sexiest of assets, also it's 20, he's 26, 27, 28.
Yeah.
It gets, those are the next couple of seasons. And it's like, once you get to like 27, 28, most people are like, who cares? You're not young anymore, which is weird, but it is what it is. And I just think that having Roman Pittman week to week is probably going to be more beneficial to your lineup than the 103 and the 201. And I get it if you are a believer that Malik is a tier above Rome Odunze, then maybe that makes sense and maybe that is fair to you. But I am not one of the believers that Nabers is tiers above Rome Odunze. And so the Pittman and the Jonathan Brooks is what does it for me. Brooks is going to be fine. I don't dislike Brooks at all. I'm high on Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman's great.
Plus, I just value. Plus, I'm going to say we because I think you feel the same. It's just a higher valuation for a wide receiver than a running back because of the shelf life of the running back position. So,
yeah, the value on Jonathan Brooks is getting nuts in the community right now.
yeah.
He's already the the running back 9 on Keep Trade Cut. He recently he's passed in the last couple of weeks. He's passed Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams. Like he is now in the conversation. It is Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Brooks, which is nuts to think that that's where we're putting him right now, especially because this year he might not even play that much. Well, he probably will play, but he's coming off of an ACL tear, guys. So
yeah,
let's pump the brakes. Let's pump the brakes. But
even coming off ACL tear, probably be better than Miles Sanders.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, early on in the year, Chuba Hubbard's getting a decent amount of work. I wouldn't be surprised. And
I think Miles Sanders gets cut in the offseason.
Next offseason?
This one.
What does the cap look like there? I can't imagine that they I think he's one where they put him on the back of the bench, they let him sit, and then next year they cut him when the cap clears a little bit more.
Yes,
But
I
I don't
heard
know.
he's not doing good at all right now.
I mean, he's probably doing fine. You know, they pay you all that money and then you get to go sit on the bench. Why not? But anyways, I think we're getting too high on Jonathan Brooks. Not that I dislike the guy, not that I think he's a bad player. He was my RB1 in this class. Just putting him in the same conversation as Achane and Barkley right now is kind of crazy. But yeah, I like the Pittman and I like the Rome side. Fair deal, I think, for both, though, for the most part, if you believe that Nabers is above. But let's go to trade 6. This one is submitted by LLD88, 12-team Superflex PPR half-point tight end premium, and start 11. LLD is going to receive Amon-Ra St. Brown and Cade Otton. He gives up Jayden Reed, Adonai Mitchell, and Dalton Kincaid. So how are we feeling here?
St. Brown side wins. Like, as much as I love Dalton Kincaid, and I love Dalton Kincaid, dude. St. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the league and one of the best fantasy assets to have. And I think a lot of people still kind of sleep on him. Do you feel like that? Like, he really is up there with CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, JJ. Like, he's up there with those guys. So, I mean, if you change his name to any of those names and that's the return, people are like, they're pounding that accept button. So, I mean, yeah, I'm leaning the St. Brown side 100%. As much as I like Reed, Mitchell, and Kincaid, you're getting a bona fide stud in Amon-Ra St. Brown. No questions asked.
I mean, I agree. You look at the other side, like you said, Kincaid, Mitchell, Reed. It's a lot of attractive pieces there. It feels like you're getting some good young pieces that you can really start building a roster around. So if you are a rebuilding roster, which maybe Express is, I don't know if he is, but if you're a rebuilding roster, maybe you're like, okay, these are 3 really good young assets that I can just kind of form this roster around. I could see you wanting that. You got to be a big believer in Kincaid, which I am.
I am too.
I had on the BDG video recently. We did a segment called Andrew's Spiciest Hot Takes or something like that, and one of my spicy hot takes was that Dalton Kincaid will finish as the tight end 1 in 2024. So I think he has that type of potential, but in a half-point tight end premium, that'll be fine for you, but it's not going to be as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Jayden Reed, I really like Jayden Reed. I really like Adonai Mitchell. And maybe that's part of why I'm like, all of these assets in this side of the deal are like some of the guys that have been my guys for like the last year. I've pumped up Adonai Mitchell all off season. I pumped up Jayden Reed for 2 years now. Like, I like all the pieces, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is a superstar and he is a dominant asset. I mean, you talk about cornerstone pieces, S tier, like he belongs. Amon-Ra St. Brown should be hand in hand with Lamborghini. Like, that is how damn good he is, man. Like, I agree. If you are just looking to get the best player in the deal, Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I think it's closer than you originally had kind of made it seem. I know you said, just give me Amon-Ra. I think there's a lot of value in the other side, but I will stay to something that I have continued to always say is when I'm giving up the best player in the deal and I'm the side that is getting 3 or 4 assets for my 1 or 2 assets, I want the best player in the deal. Give me the best player in the deal, unless I'm a rebuilder. And even then, I might want the best player in the deal. So I will go the Amon-Ra St. Brown side, but I do like that package for Express Lane. I think this is an interesting trade.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't for the fact that, I mean, Amon-Ra is basically, he's a young asset as well. So, I mean, there's that factor that I factored into it as well. So, I mean, it's not like you're trading for those 3 guys and you're getting back an elite older asset. You're getting you're giving up a young asset that's elite right now.
Yeah. Let me ask you something because I feel a specific way about this. I want to know if you feel the same way about it. Do you give a shit about Cade Otton in this deal?
No, he's just there.
I don't even see
His
him.
name, if you take his first initial of his name is like Cotton. That's the only thing I recognized about him. I him being there.
I could take him out of this deal, and I would view it the exact same way. Like,
Yeah.
the way that I'm viewing this is Amon-Ra for those 3 pieces.
I'll feel better if it was Amon-Ra in the third or something. Like, you could switch
I don't
any
want
generic
Otton.
piece with Cade Otton.
Yeah, whatever. Sorry, Cade. Let's go to this last trade here. This is a big one, and there's a lot of fluff in here, I feel like. So we'll talk about
Yeah.
it, but unique settings. And one thing very specifically I want to talk about, and this is why I included this in this trade show. 14 team super flex PPR half point tight end premium start 8. So it's 14 teams, lots of teams, and start 8 shallow lineups. Both teams missed the playoffs in 2023. They are trying to make it to where they don't miss the playoffs anymore. Anon is the one who submitted this trade. He gets Russell Wilson, Antonio Gibson, and Zay Flowers. He gives up Jimmy Garoppolo, Irv Smith, Tyler Allgeier, George Pickens, a second and a third. I think just the way that it is, there's a lot of BS in this deal.
Yeah.
Irv Smith, for the sake of the simplifying this, probably doesn't matter.
No.
Jimmy Garoppolo is borderline not mattering, but in a 14-team super flex, backup quarterbacks have a lot more value, and Matthew Stafford doesn't have the cleanest health record ever. So
Correct.
Jimmy could potentially have some value in this type of format. But where do you want to start with this? And if you're not sure where you want to start, I can conduct this train and kind of lead this discussion if you want.
I mean, I'm kind of just looking at, for the sake of me figuring this shit all out, I have to immediately like block out Garoppolo, Allgeier, and Smith. Like, so now I'm just looking at it strictly, even though I know Garoppolo has value in this type of format. His value.
Let's do this, because I feel like it might be easier to work from the top down rather than from going from the bottom up. Let's work from the top down. So the big parts of this deal is George Pickens and Zay Flowers. Like, these are 2 young wide receiver assets that are valuable in these types of formats. How do you feel about those 2 assets in comparison to each other? Are you a George Pickens believer? Are you a Zay Flowers believer? Do you think these guys are close enough in value? And if they're not close in value, what on either side has to be added to make it fair for just those 2 guys?
I feel like there's a little gap between Zay and George Pickens.
Okay, and you have Zay higher.
Yeah.
Okay, I would probably agree with you, but I do like George Pickens.
Yeah.
Is George in a second too much for Zay, or does that feel comfortable for you?
Because it's a 26 second, it feels fair.
Okay, so let's just take those pieces out of the deal. So Zay Flowers, Pickens, and a second. We said that's fair. We'll pull them out of the deal. Now that leaves us with Garoppolo, Irv, Allgeier, and a third for Gibson and Russell Wilson.
Barbecue chicken.
In this type of format, can we also say that Antonio Gibson and Tyler Allgeier, they're damn near the same thing? They can just cancel each other out.
No, I don't think they're the same. That's the thing. I don't think they're the same. I think Antonio Gibson is more valuable than Allgeier.
Okay, so you would throw probably the third in Allgeier to equal Gibson?
That's tricky, because I don't know if he's that much fun. But yeah, he is. Because the way I look at it, Bijan is so much greater of an asset than Allgeier versus Ramondre versus Gibson. I think Gibson will get more run than Allgeier will in that offense. So
fair enough.
So yeah, I guess a third in Allgeier and Gibson. I guess we could remove that.
So that leaves you with Jimmy Garoppolo and Irv Smith for Russell Wilson.
And I'm leaning Russ, I guess. Well, it's no, I guess I do. I guess I do. Because I feel like he's going to lose his job at some point. But that's still, even with him possibly losing his job, it's still obviously more than Garoppolo and Irv Smith.
Yeah, I think that's the way that you got to look at it, and doing that math and breaking it down that way from the bottom or from the top down, it almost leaves you with that, okay, I feel like I prefer the Anon side, but for the sake of the conversation, I want to bring this up because the context that they gave us was both of these teams missed the playoffs in 2023, and they're trying to make playoffs this year.
Mhm.
If you are Anon, despite the fact that you've now won this deal in value terms, you've given up your second 2 years from now, a third this year, a young guy in George Pickens, and you missed playoffs last year.
Mhm.
Is this again in that same theme that we were talking about where you're trying to push those chips in and be a contender in June, and maybe even worse, and I'm not saying this, Anon, if you're watching this, I'm not saying this disrespectfully. I don't even know what your team looks like, but are you trying to make a bad team mediocre so you can make the playoffs just for the said thing of making the playoffs? And then you're selling off future capital to do that. That feels like a bad idea.
But we're also missing a lot of context too,
There's a
because
lot of
was
context
his
missing.
team. His team missed the playoffs because he suffered injuries to key players. Or, I mean, for example, what if he has Joe Burrow? Like,
Yeah.
so did he suffer a key injury that made him miss the playoffs? Or, just even thinking down to like, it's Justin Fields on his roster and he has Russell Wilson. Like, that's like, there's just a lot to go into it. I do think, though, for just looking through the scope of I missed the playoffs last season, I think Anon took a step closer to his goal
Of making the
versus
playoffs.
to making the playoffs. But he did give up valuable draft capital.
Yeah, I reason why I wanted to add it in there is just because of that, and I think generally my theme for today's show was the not worrying about being a contender and not worrying about
Mhm.
pushing into the playoffs and not worrying about doing all of that stuff here in June. Because at the end of the day, mostly, and do not hear what I'm not saying, winning games is the most important thing in fantasy football because that's what gets you championships and that's what gets you paid and that's what gets you all the other stuff that you want. But you do that by accumulating the most value in the trade room and in your drafts and in all of that stuff. And so pushing in chips, losing trades to become a contender because you want to get an older asset now in June and yada, 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 that's not as important as just focusing on the value, getting the most value in the trade market today. Because in November, December, when it's time to talk about playoffs and who's going to win the money, that's when you push those chips in. We don't got to do it today because we still got 80 days until preseason. Like we got a long time here, boys. Like we don't we got a long time. We don't got to push those chips in today, and that's generally the theme for this show. So, that's what I wanted people to walk away with today is just it's fun to think about, who's going to win the championship this year, and it's good if you think you are one of those people. But just keep in mind, we're not playing games for another 2 months, 3 months. We're not playing games until then. So,
Yeah.
it may be fun to make those moves today. I'm guilty of it too. I've caught myself in that mindset a couple times in leagues this offseason where I'm like, ooh, I could go get a Derrick Henry. Ooh, I could go get a guy like this, and it would make my team really good. But then I'm like, I don't need Derrick Henry until it's time to play games. That's when I
Yeah.
need to go get him. So that's what I wanted people to walk away with today. But overall, this deal, I think you're right. Anon, he took a step closer to accomplishing his goal of making the playoffs in 2023. There's a lot of context missing. Hopefully, it's not you trying to force a bad team to be in the middle of the pack because that's detrimental to your roster long term. But overall, I think this trade did help him out. But Teely Dan, if he's saying, hey, we're going to blow this up, and I just am getting a young guy and picking some draft capital and some things like that, maybe he accomplished his goal today too.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
All right, man. Well, you have anything else to add to that general theme before we get on out of here of pushing the chips in? No?
No, man. All I gotta say is, man, just wait it out, see how it plays out.
Fair enough. All right, guys. So that is going to be it for today's show. Next episode. This is 3 weeks out. I'm not even gonna think about it. There will be a next episode, and you will get a next episode, and you will enjoy what you see from your boys here on Let's Talk Dynasty when that episode comes out. It'll be back in the live stream. I'll actually be in the seat physically when you're watching it. So all things will be well. If you enjoyed today's episode, like, subscribe, comment, do all of those good YouTube things. And if you want your trades reviewed on a future episode, just go down into the description. There's a link to a Discord. It is free to join that Discord. In there is a trade review channel. You just submit those completed trades with some context in that trade review channel, and that's where we pull them for the next trade show. So we do those about 2 times a month. You guys will get them every other week. If you want your trades reviewed, go join that Discord. War, you got anything for the good people before we leave?
Yes. Over on the Crimson Mass Show, we talk about pro wrestling, WWE, AEW. We post wrestling content. And I also want to say for those viewers of this channel who have subscribed to me, thank you so much. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. So now we're on the march to 2,500 subscribers. We're just going to keep it going. So please join us over on the Crimson Mass Show, and we'll see you there.
Hell yeah. And one more thing, guys. I usually don't do this, but I'm going to do it today because it was really fun to make and it was really cool and I really enjoyed it. But I recently did a video on this channel where I brought in 15 analysts from around the fantasy football industry, and they all drafted. It was like phone a friend, how to be a millionaire, or I want to be a millionaire style. And it was really fun. It was really cool. The feedback on it has been amazing so far. If you haven't watched that video, go watch that video. I will link it in the description of this video. It's dope. It was really fun to make. People said it's a very cool concept, a new concept that hasn't been done in this industry. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it. I would appreciate it. And with that being said, War, we don't got anything else for anybody today, so we'll get on out of here. But until then, guys, peace out.